You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Buick. News, views and interviews in association with FE News. Hello, I'm Tom Buick. Welcome to your latest weekly edition of Skills World Live. And phew, what a scorcher it's been, folks. If you're listening in Western Europe, easily one of the hottest days of the year so far. Back in old Blighty, this week saw the Prime Minister Boris Johnson announce the 4th of July as our next Independence Day from the coronavirus challenge. Not that you'll be able to join our American cousins to celebrate their own Declaration of Independence. An air corridor across the Atlantic is not expected to be established until after the presidential elections in November. Just think of all those American tourists that will now sadly be absent from places like London, Bath and Stonehenge this summer. Talking of Neolithic monuments, researchers from the University of St Andrews this week also announced they had found another henge-type monument buried deep underground, just a few miles apart from that iconic Stonehenge we all know and love. Isn't it just amazing what our ancestors and those ancient Britons could do over 4,000 years ago? And talking of radiocarbon dating, ladies and gentlemen, we got a cracking show for you tonight. Stand by for 60 glorious minutes of the only online community radio show connecting the world of FE. We're all about the adult skills agenda this evening. It's understandable, perhaps, that in a crisis, people want to talk about the impact of the pandemic on young people. And it's fair to say that on this show, we dedicated a lot of live broadcast minutes to that particular challenge. On Skills World Live this evening, we'll be levelling up the conversation by exploring the question, how do we ensure the adult skills agenda is not forgotten? Let's not also forget that the majority of adults in the workforce are over the age of 25, and at least 2/3 of them will still be in the labour force in the year 2030. Andy Haldane, the chief economist and top nerd at the Bank of England, says that adult education is the collapsed left lung even, of our entire skills system. Sector leaders, meanwhile, point to savage cuts in recent years to the adult and community budget, over 40% reductions in some cases, including what appears to be a complete absence of any comprehensive lifelong learning plan. All of this, of course, as we gear up for possibly the biggest unemployment challenge in this country since the Great Depression, as emergency treasury schemes like furlough are eventually switched off. Stay tuned, folks, for 60 glorious minutes of sunshine-induced, informed chat and FE topical debate. You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Buick. On tonight's programme, we've got an exclusive pre-recorded interview with Gillian Keegan MP, England's Apprenticeships and Skills Minister. In the phone chat sections of the show, we'll be reflecting on the state of adult education with former Skills Minister Anne Milton and the Association of Colleges top policy person David Cork. I'll be debating with them whether the Department for Education really will come good on its promises to the FE sector this time. Don't go away, though, folks, because I'll be continuing tonight's debate with the labour market expert, Dr. Fiona Aldridge, and the ALP's policy chief, Simon Ashworth. It's his inaugural appearance on the show. But first, let's find out what's been making the news headlines in your skills world this week. The latest data on apprenticeship starts for England make grim reading. The Department for Education has published provisional data this week that shows a nearly 50% decline in apprenticeship starts since the lockdown began on March 23rd. Compared to the same period last year, when over 50,000 people commenced on an apprenticeship, the latest data shows a reduction to just 26,000 starts. Young people under the age of 19 have been particularly hit hard, with only 7.7% commencing on an apprenticeship during the crisis period. Sector representative bodies have challenged the government to do more to invest in helping employers retain and recruit more apprentices at a time when youth unemployment has doubled. In other news, the Association of Colleges is warning that the sector could be £2 billion worse off next year if the government does not step in. AOC boss David Hughes told the Education Select Committee this week that in a survey of 17 college members, the lobby organisation had found a projected fall in income of £30 million because of declining apprenticeship starts. Hughes said that when extrapolated across all FE colleges in England, including lost commercial income, this could result in a £2 billion shortfall of the sector's £7 billion budget next year. And finally, the government-backed Social Mobility Commission this week called on ministers to do more to increase the number of people from disadvantaged backgrounds securing apprenticeships. Data released by the Independent Advisory Panel shows that since 2015, the number of starts for learners from disadvantaged backgrounds has declined by 36%, compared to only 23% for learners from wealthier backgrounds. The acting joint chair of the Commission, Stephen Cooper, told this programme only last week that the government could be doing more to level up opportunities in apprenticeships and skills across the whole country, after it emerged that only about a third of the Commission's recommendations have been fully implemented by Whitehall departments since 2013. That's all your Skills World news from fenews.co.uk.
Contact us at Skills World Live. Email skillsworld@fenews.co.uk. Follow us on Twitter @Tom Buick, @FENews. Use the hashtag SkillsWorld. Call us on 02032 900 111. That's 02032 900 111.
Tell you what, it's getting like a sauna in this man cave of mine where I'm broadcasting this show to you this evening. Now, that track was called Blinded by the Night, and the artist, Stray Bandit, as ever, selected from our independent music site of choice, epidemicsound.com. Indeed, it looks like our musical preferences are influencing the very top of Her Majesty's government. Early this week, the show's editor, Gavin O'Mara, sent me an email with a link to the number 10 Downing Street YouTube channel. Guess what, folks? Turns out Bojo's comms team have also signed up to the Epidemic music catalogue as well. Now, talking of government ministers, I was able to catch up with Gillian Keegan MP earlier, England's Apprenticeships and Skills Under Secretary of State at the Department for Education. I asked her about some of the recent challenges affecting FE, and in particular, what her department was planning to do to ensure the adult skills and opportunity agenda is not forgotten. After this very short break, you can hear what she told me.
You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Buick.
Gillian Keegan, thanks again for joining with our listeners on Skills World Live.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
We're focusing on the adult skills agenda on the show tonight, but can I ask you about a couple of things that have made the headlines recently in your area? Last week, a press release went out from your department suggesting that FE and colleges would benefit from a share of a £1 billion catch-up and tutoring scheme, only to discover a couple of hours later that they were being excluded from this vital financial support. What happened?
Well, I mean, obviously everything's happening in super quick time, but, I think it's clear that the initial focus was really on the schools. And that's because, we've had much more challenge, obviously, with schools in terms of online learning, and the picture's a bit more mixed, whereas in the FE sector, for sure, they've done an amazing job of still trying to deliver as much learning as possible online, and probably are the standout sector with that regard. So I think, there was a bit of discussions and confusion, but the initial focus was on schools. But we do recognise very much so that there is a need for the sector. In particular, colleges have been right to highlight to me the concern they have for the cohort that are going to join in September. Particularly those that, have missed out on their last 6 months of school, and in particular, those ones that have, just completed their GCSEs. We know we have a challenge with every new cohort with English and maths, for some young people, and that is not going to have got better. It's actually probably amplified that challenge. So we are still focused on. We understand and recognise that need, and we are still focused on trying to come up with something for the sector.
And when you say come up with something for the sector, because I think, as you say, Minister, I mean, it's nothing new about confusion between government departments, but I suppose, the way obviously that news came out and then was changed, it kind of gives the impression that FE, already feeling a bit bruised, that it's the neglected middle child in the education system, squeezed between schools and universities, that sort of sense that once again they've kind of fallen on the wrong side of the justice scales. But I hear from what you're saying that actually it's all about what could happen in the future as well, with things like the spending review with the Treasury.
Yeah, and I think that sentiment of FE not being enough of a focus in the past has actually been right, but that has been addressed, and it's certainly a big focus now. It was of the Conservative manifesto, and it is of the focus in government and across government departments. So we have record investment actually in the sector with an increase which is bigger than schools actually got for this year. But as you say, after a long time where it wasn't invested in, but we've now got capital spend programs. We've obviously got T-levels. We've got institutes of technology. We know obviously the base rate has improved. And then we've got the National Skills Fund, billions of pounds, £3 billion, which has been announced as well. So we are actually receiving a lot more investment than we've had, and that's good to see.
Okay. Can I ask you about the Social Mobility Commission report on apprenticeships? It was published earlier this week. The non-departmental public body, the Social Mobility Commission, found that starts in apprenticeships for those from a disadvantaged background have declined by 36% since the reforms kicked in, compared to a 23% decline in starts overall. I mean, do you agree with the Commission's main recommendations that these declines should be reversed and that more of a focus on getting disadvantaged people into apprenticeships should now take place?
I mean, apprenticeships are social mobility driver, and I completely agree. Indeed, it's my own story that it changed my life, my apprenticeship that I started at 16. So I 100% see the power of them, and it's always been a great way for people to get on where you've had barriers to overcome that a lot of other people don't have. So I think it's always been, really good at doing that. Now, I think there's two things though. One is there is no point in doing a low quality apprenticeship. That doesn't give you any, it might make people feel happy with looking at a number, but it doesn't give you the experience you need to have valuable transferable skills that the employer values. So, clearly what we have done has made sure that anybody who's doing an apprenticeship, it's a high quality experience. And that was important for the employers because the brand image, the employers thought there were some examples where actually it wasn't a quality apprenticeship at all. Now, if that report therefore tells you that people, who are more disadvantaged were being given the opportunity to do low quality courses more than others, then that doesn't fill me with any hope either. That's not what I want to be happening. It has to be a good quality experience.
Sure.
And I've heard so many young people who've said to me, that I did a low level apprenticeship. It was admin, and actually all I did was learn how to fill in one form. It was rubbish. So we really have to make sure that is not the apprenticeship experience.
Yeah.
They need to get a good quality experience, and I'll continue focused on that. That's the reason I'm in politics. I'll continue to focus on that until everybody's had the opportunity to do a high quality apprenticeship.
I think that's a really strong point. I mean, do you not feel actually that sometimes as a sector and indeed more broadly, we're just trying to put too much on the apprenticeship brand as being somehow the absolute catch-all sort of universal answer to all the kind of ills that potentially we've got around youth, labour market participation, and of course the challenges now with the coronavirus. I mean, that from your vantage point in the department, it must feel a bit like that.
Well, I mean, what's great about apprenticeships, and particularly the focus that we've had in the more recent years, has been it actually is a very close collaboration between a large number of employers and the Department for Education, and that's a very helpful approach, I think. So it's a very fast-moving environment. We've just gone through, we're in the middle of the coronavirus, and the impact we have seen it have almost overnight on some sectors that will not recover to the same degree. It's basically accelerated a decline and a shift, and things like that can happen in the, particularly in the digital world, very, very, very quickly. So people have to be learning the latest skills, and a good way of doing that is that collaboration between the business, the job, and the study.
Let's turn now to adult skills. I mean, it's no secret in the sector that the adult education budget did take a bit of a bashing during the austerity years. I mean, something like 40% was chopped off that budget. I mean, this has included over 4 million less adults in learning over the past decade. In things like community education centres. What will you be doing to increase adult and community learning opportunities then as we try to recover from this pandemic?
I think we've so there's a couple of things. The first is we've kind of had a more focused approach. So really, it's been very much focused on level 2 English and maths, and we've added digital skills. That's going to be available now as of August. And we've also added the functional skills, so functional elements of English and maths to help in terms of context to improve the offer for adults in particular. So I think that's where we've actually been focused. And, and we've also obviously provided the future digital inclusion, which don't link to a qualification, but really do remove the barriers for people. We've had 1.4 million people who've been able to participate in that. So I think we've just been much more focused. And once you get these basic skills, you can open up a lot more opportunity. And that's where the focus has been. But again, we've also had things like the skills toolkit that's available online. That's got a number of introduction up to advanced courses that are freely available. And I think the opportunity to change and shift how we deliver things, if people are comfortable digitally, is so much greater. It's really a game changer. Of course, the National Skills Fund will be consulting on that when everybody's back and working and ready to engage to figure out how we're going to focus that money. So, we spend £1.34 billion, and we've got a huge investment going forward in the National Skills Fund. So I think it's an opportunity for us to shape it, but it's always incredibly difficult to know what works and what gives a real return to the individual, and that's what we've got to get better as a sector, and really making the choices of the things that turn the dial most for learners.
And on that point about individuals, I mean, again, you'll know this, over £20 billion actually is spent on all forms of post-compulsory education and training, which obviously includes the lion's share there, which goes to universities. I mean, is this is this an opportunity post the crisis, but also with the expected white paper in the autumn, to think about a policy framework where actually we could empower adults of all ages with, for example, the resources, skills accounts, the kind of ideas that have been knocking around for a while, in terms of really kind of empowering a proper lifelong learning strategy in this country?
Well, I think certainly we want to empower lifelong learning, and we recognise, working with my colleagues across government as well in BEIS and the DWP, there are going to be shifts. We do have future skills. We've been talking this week about, the move in energy from, the kind of oil and gas sector to renewables, and what skills that, how we upskill people to be able to build on the skills they've got, but just, make them relevant for a new environment. So very much we're focused on solving those problems and helping solve those problems. How exactly it's going to look, obviously that will be a matter that will come up in the consultation. And I'm just really interested in what works. And I look at it very much from the perspective of the learner and the employer.
Okay. Appreciate we could spend a lot of time actually talking about what the government should be doing. But as you know, adult education is a shared challenge between the employer, the individual and the state. But the fact is that British firms invest now about 5 times less in their employees' training than German firms do. How as a country do you think can we get more employers to actually invest in workforce skills and training in the future, given that 2/3 of today's adults in the workforce will still be there in the years 2030?
I think what employers need is confidence of what to invest in. And what we do know, and this is another subject of consultation, we've got, I think it's something like 12,000 qualifications at level 3 and another, I think 4,000 or so at level 4. It's just too crowded. And, what we do is we make it very difficult for people to really focus and be confident that if they do X qualification, it will lead them to a good career. That we need to make sure is much more clearly understood. And you're right, the German system that's much better developed, and that way of working, that partnership with employers is got probably a longer history. I feel very confident though, if you look at the work that's been done with T-levels, if you look at the collaboration and the improvements in quality of apprenticeships and all that work and now we've got the skills and productivity boards as well coming on stream. So I do feel very confident that we've got all the solid foundations to really build that. And businesses will invest. I said to many people in the DFE, I take my own journey. The DFE gave me a nosy comprehensive school experience, and everything else I've done ever since has been a business who've invested in me, including, executive education, including Master of Science, all of those things. Businesses will invest if they're confident that they're going to get something back from it. And what we've done is made it difficult for them, so we need to make it easy for them. Okay.
Finally, can I just ask you when adult education centres will be allowed to reopen? I mean, there are many people who've already been made unemployed, unfortunately, but they could obviously be benefiting from those adult education centres if they could reopen.
Yes, and there's very much a call from the sector. It's funny, some sectors are reluctant to go back. Adult education is can't wait to go back and is pushing. Can we go back? We know how we're going to do this, and so we're very, very conscious of that. I mean, clearly they've also done a brilliant job of moving online. In fact, I went for a virtual visit to City Lit early on, and it's amazing actually what they can do online, even with courses that you would have thought would have been very challenging to deliver online. But necessity is the mother of all invention, as they say, and they certainly have been inventive. So I think, we're very conscious of that. The challenge, and I'll be very honest, the challenge is really about the public transport systems.
Right.
And, if effectively, obviously we're trying to get people to go back to work, that absolutely need to get back into the workplace. We're trying to get young people back to school and colleges back and all of that. And the challenge is just really the bottleneck is around, a lot of the bottlenecks are around public transport. So that's really, sometimes the policies, looking from it, you might think, well, if I can go here, why can't I go there? The problem is just how everybody gets there. So that's kind of what the government's wrestling with. And of course, they'll follow the medical evidence and science, and they're keeping under review all kinds of things like, to make things easier. And, I hope we can get, more flexibilities for more people to go back, in the near future. Right now, there's flexibility for those up to the age of 19 to be able to get some access to face-to-face. But clearly, everybody, as you say, is very keen to get back online. But things like the skills toolkit, have been an amazing success, and I think it is because a lot of people are at home and their thirst for knowledge and learning, their understanding that they're going to need to, have the skills to offer to the workplace is still there. So as soon as we possibly can, we will get the sector back. And as I say, it's a very different problem some of my colleagues are wrestling with, which is actually that they can't wait to go back.
Thanks for joining this online community radio station, which came about as a result of the crisis. Gillian Keegan, Minister for Apprenticeships and Skills in England, thanks again for sharing your time with us today.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Subscribe to Skills World Live at fenews.co.uk/Skills World.
If I'm the bad one, take a look at yourself in the mirror. If I'm the worst one, ask anybody else who they prefer. If it comes down to me and you, I think that you are the one with a bad attitude. Why start a conflict? You got no clue. Tell me, what is your problem? All is rules you spread doesn't make you feel good too. Cause bloodshed, 'cause I don't really get it. The rumors that you're spreading, can see what happened. I mean, we used to be friends a while back now. I know you're trapped in, you ran into a deep end, a real breakdown. You are imbued with jealousy. Why would you otherwise be charging so hard at me? Why start a conflict? Can't you see that I'm not your problem? All is rumors you spread doesn't make you feel good too. Cause bloodshed, 'cause I don't really get it. The rumors that you're spreading, I don't really get it. I don't. You shoot in the dark, 'cause you got nothing on me. You try to light a spark, but I won't fall for that. I won't fall for that. All these rumors you spread doesn't make you feel good too. Cause bloodshed, 'cause I don't really get these rumors you spread doesn't make you feel good too. Cause bloodshed, 'cause I don't really get it. The rumors that you're spreading, I don't really get it. I don't.
Post-COVID world.
That was Daxton by Y, and I think it's a track called Rumours. Now, to continue with tonight's big debate. I'm delighted that we've got on the line the Right Honourable Anne Milton. Good evening, Anne.
Yeah, I can hear you. Good evening. Nice
Great.
to be on the show.
Great to get you back on by popular demand. Now, join us in this three-way phone chat is another guest returner, David Cork, who's Director of Education and Skills Policy at the Association of Colleges. Good evening, David.
Hello, Tom. How are you?
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, to be honest, though, I'm also, let's just say it's resembling a sauna in this studio, this man cave of a studio that I'm broadcasting from in the heart of Sussex. Now, Anne, let's start with you. I don't know whether you got a chance earlier to listen to your successor, Gillian Keegan's interview with me. Anyway, I mean, I asked her about the mix-up of the recent £1 billion tutor catch-up scheme and the fact that FE was initially included, then excluded from the press announcement. How true is the speculation, do you think, that it was Treasury who overruled DfE ministers on this at the last minute?
I wouldn't want to speculate. I mean, Treasury can always overrule ministers. It's the bottom line. It may or may not have happened in this case. So it is possible. But it's, when I saw that, I could have wept, really.
Yeah.
I wouldn't blame Gillian Keegan. She's a good woman. She grew up through the apprenticeship system. She's got a real commitment to FE. But it makes you want to weep because, yet again, FE somehow gets to the bottom of the pile. I think you described it as being like the neglected middle child. Mm. And that's what it feels like. And the trouble is, this might have been an error. It might have been Treasury. It doesn't really matter what it was. But yet again, it was FE.
Yeah, indeed. Now, David, as I said to the Minister earlier, when things like this happen, and Anne's just referred to it, I mean, whether these are mix-ups or not, and I suppose we'll never know. But it does rather play into that narrative, doesn't it, that FE colleges are the sort of Cinderella or the neglected middle child in our education system. I mean, your members must have been furious about this.
I think David Hughes said that it was unjustifiable, which I tend to agree with. I do hope that the government work on a whole sector recovery package that is aligned to the needs of the economy post-COVID. I think that a package that is geared towards the need of the economy is the right thing to do. And I don't think that the conversations are over yet in government with regards to the 16 to 19 catch-up offer, because just from a human and popular perspective, how can you justify a 15-year-old who's going to be going into college next year, not needing catch-up compared to a 14-year-old? It just doesn't compute, does it really?
No, it doesn't, and it did seem really quite odd. Now, Anne, I mean, in terms of Treasury then, do you think that the investment, the promised investment, the perceived promised investment will come in the either summer statement or the spending review? I mean, you oversaw, obviously, an increase in funding, didn't you, to FE colleges? So I think, as the Minister was saying, compared to schools, she argued they have had a better settlement recently. Do you think it's all going to come in the spending review?
Well, I sincerely hope so, Tom, because the way we get out of this is by upskilling and reskilling our workforce, and that includes 16 to 19-year-olds. They are the key to unlock our future economic prosperity. And I get very tired with people saying they care about things. I can only judge how much people care by how much money they put into it. That is, at the end of the day, the only measure. And this is really critical. And it's every 16 to 90-year-olds, and you talked about adult education, adults are saying. Yeah. And we've got to get motoring. It's the urgency.
Do you think? Do you think that adults will get the investment? Because obviously, as I've said before, we focus a lot on this show, understandably, on young people, on 16 to 19, very understandably. But historically, adults haven't always done well out of spending reviews when it's come to adult and community education. I mean, do you think it could be different this time, Anne?
Well, we don't have a choice, actually, Tom. I mean, go pre-COVID. I know it feels like a lifetime away. Does, I was at international conferences, 55 different countries represented, and everybody agreed we have a world skills shortage. So this was necessary beforehand. If you've got 6 million adults who don't have level 2 qualifications, you've got a workforce that could be working for the economy, but critically, for them to get a good job and get a decent career. We need those people. We absolutely need those people. Yeah. We have to mobilise every single adult every single 16 to 19-year-old that we possibly can.
Yeah, go on, David, come in on that point.
Yeah, as Anne has said, it's super urgent, and all of these issues that we're seeing now and have seen in the past in terms of inequality with adult education are magnified in a COVID world. But the worst is yet to come, because when the post-furlough shock kicks in, that's when we're really going to need the adult education system. So government need initiatives for 18, 19-year-olds as well as older adults. Yeah. They need to be selective. They need to have a government need to have a clear plan on the investment that is going to be needed, and it needs to be aligned to the economy. It needs to be aligned to the productive sectors.
Yeah. So on that then, I mean, the AOC's been no shortage, obviously, of ideas and initiatives they've put forward recently, not least in this skills recovery plan. I mean, you've put forward a price tag just over £3 billion for that skills recovery plan. How much of that is going to be earmarked, in your view, or should be earmarked for adult and community learning then?
So there's the second level threes, because obviously, and flexible unit delivery, that's about 100,000 places, and that's roughly £500 million. And then there was another 800 million that we wanted government to earmark for those 18 and 19-year-olds that are just entering the labour market, whose prospects will be scarred for 10 to 15 years. So a very good a chunk of it, and that's without even taking into account sort of the levelling up agenda and the place-based inequality that we see. So it's not just about a national response; it's about the local response as well, and making sure, especially in those northern constituencies where it will really matter, especially where they've been hit by COVID the most.
And can I ask you, is it time we bring back ideas that were once around, like individual learning accounts, that we look to bring something like that back? Because if you think about this empowering point, which I discussed, with Gillian Keegan, surely the lesson from the furlough scheme has been, actually, when government moves very rapidly and gets money into the hands of businesses and individuals, i.e. employees, they're then best placed to decide what to do with it. I mean, I'll take the point about you still want security, so you probably won't be handing out hard cash to learners. It's probably a digital credit system. But still, we've got that experience, haven't we, with the levy digital accounts for employers. Surely we just roll it out to all businesses and all adults.
Well, not that simple, and there are some lessons from the past that are worth remembering.
Yeah, but this was the early 2000s, wasn't it? I mean, ILAs were knocking around before virtual currencies and blockchain and all that kind of stuff.
The department had done some really, really good work on, when I was a minister, on the National Retraining Scheme. Yeah. So if you take adults, but actually similar things would apply to 18, 19, 20-year-olds as well. What motivates people to learn? How do they learn best? Often it's a blend. Do they need mentoring? What settings do they learn best in? And all those things. You need quite a bespoke offer. So what actually those offering the learning need to have quite a lot of flexibility. I think there's a very strong case for devolving a lot of this, because I think in local areas are often best placed to decide what sort of learning is going to work in their area. But the bottom line is people will do the learning, particularly people who maybe don't have as many qualifications, if they know there's a job at the end of it. So this is all predicated on the jobs being there.
Yeah.
Just another aggressive agreement with Anne on something there. In blended learning, I don't think we're going to go back to the form of night school that we once had before. And in September, are we really going to to see a big reduction in our adults being able to go in? I mean, I know that we're going to see some guidance about adults fairly soon, about letting adults come back in for their unfinished assessments. But for September, there's still going to be some form of social distancing. So a blended offer is we can be certain of from September. And I think good luck to any government that would want to implement a learner account system by September, because national computer systems and the previous history, as Anne mentioned, with learning accounts.
Except on that point, Dave, you think about it, the system's already there. They've just got billions of pounds out to individual businesses via the PAYE system, which has been passed on obviously to employees in their pay packets. I think the point is actually the government has shown that the technology is there. Now, I take Anne's point about one's always got to look at the issues around security, fraud, and making sure ultimately the money is targeted and prioritised. But that's surely the experience of the furlough scheme, how rapidly government can move to get purchasing power, if you want to call it that, into the hands of businesses and employees. What's your view on that, Anne? I
think the one point that I think is important is the government have done things very quickly, and some of the things very well, at a pace that we have never seen government operate.
Yeah, extraordinary.
Therefore, there is no excuse not to continue to do this. And, the catch-up programme, the scarring that David talked of, which, is uppermost in one's mind at the moment, the filling the skills gap, getting adults into jobs, as David said, the worst is yet to come, getting those 16 to 19, 20-year-olds. I mean, we have an odd business of cutting people off at 24 for some reasons. Yeah. We put age limits on things, and they're not necessarily valid at all. But we need to move at pace, and the government has demonstrated it can when it wants to.
Yeah. The scarring cost is, if they don't invest in just the 18 to 19-year-olds alone, is 5 billion, and the return on investment, if they do, would be about 7.2 billion. So that's just for one subsection of the recovery plan that we put forward. But that recovery plan has to underpin the economic need, doesn't it? And so align it really strongly to the needs of the economy, and you've got a win-win for everybody. And the alternative of doing nothing is that we'll have fewer nurses, fewer plumbers, fewer electricians, fewer engineers, and people will be going into other parts of the system and using the benefit system, universal credit, and maybe even the prison service, because of the scale. It's easily over 100,000 people. So
I mean, it's
an investment or cost.
Sure. I mean, look, it's the classic, isn't it? You either spend the bills on economic and social failure, or as government working with the public and private sector, we try and innovate our way out of trouble. I mean, just rolling forward to September then, because we've referred to this huge unemployment challenge looming. In fact, it's there already for young people, because actually unemployment's doubled in the last few weeks. There are millions, of course, on the furlough scheme. So what would you say, David, then, to that former airline worker at Gatwick that's unfortunately found themselves to be made redundant, and they want to retrain at a local college? What will be on offer then for them from the autumn, or what should be on offer?
So it depends on whether we're trying to fulfil the PM's promise around apprenticeships and or a class-based offer alongside that as well. But I would say that they need to go through a process with a college or with the National Careers Service or another partner like JCP and get advised into where their skills are transferable and be moved on either to an adjacent career or an aligned career in some way, because there will be a lot of damage to jobs, won't there? And so we need to help reskill people, and we don't have a system that allows that. We've got a system that's built on the 2006 Lord Sandy Leach targets of full level 2s and full level 3s.
Blast from the past, Anne, I mean, your old parliamentary seat was Guildford. There'll be already people, I'm sure, there that have been affected by coronavirus and the fallout of redundancies. What would you want to see in your local area? I mean, final word to you in terms of the FE offer from September.
I'd like to see something very agile and edgy and fast moving. I think what's important is that nobody quite yet knows how people feel about jobs. So we've always had a problem, say, recruiting into the care sector. We've got a huge shortage of nurses, but the NHS has been celebrated every week since lockdown started until recently. So people will maybe feel differently about the jobs that they are prepared to do or want to do. So I think we first of all need to find out exactly what that is like now. Before all this, we were trying to push people into engineering. Is that still the case? Yeah. So you have to marry the two up, but we know that there are areas that have been notoriously difficult to recruit to, and people might have changed their mind about where they're prepared to go and work. Okay. I mean, I speak as a former nurse, but, the most moving moments in my ministerial career were when, 40-year-old women came up to me. They started the nurse assistant apprenticeship. They'd been previously working in admin and said, I've always wanted to be a nurse. This is fantastic. I still get a salary. I'm trained to be a nurse. Yep. People will feel differently, but there will be new opportunities, particularly in the public sector, that I think we need to make sure we get out there to young people and indeed older adults. Okay.
Well, let's end on that positive note that there will be potentially more opportunity. Honourable Anne Milton and David Cork, Association of Colleges. Thanks so much for coming on the show this evening, sharing your insights and views with us. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Okay.
You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Buick.
Do you miss me at all? Do you think about the things we used to do? No, you couldn't stand tall. So why didn't you call? So many years has gone by, but I think about you all the time. Looks like you're changing and all. Well, why didn't you call? Something in the air, always something in the air. Inexplicable, I can feel it in the air. Can you feel me? Can you feel me? Can you feel me? Do you miss me at all? Do you think about the things we used to do? No, you couldn't stand tall. So why didn't you call? So many years has gone by, but I think about you all the time. Looks like you're changing and all. But why didn't you call? Something in the air, always something in the air. Inexplicable, I can feel it in the air. Can you feel me? Can you feel me? Can you feel me? Can you feel me? Something in the air, always something in the air. Inexplicable, I can feel it in the air. Can you feel me?
Can You Feel Me? That's by an artist called Love Beans at good old epidemicsound.com. So, final phone chat section of the show. I'm absolutely delighted now to be joined by Fiona Aldridge, who's the Director for Policy and Research at the Learning and Work Institute. Good evening, Fiona. Good evening, Fiona.
How are you?
Hi, I'm well, thank you. And Simon Ashworth, whose first time appearance on the show. He's the Chief Policy Officer at the Association of Employment and Learning Providers. Good evening, Simon.
Hi, Tom. Hi, everybody.
Great. Now, Fiona, coming to you first, why are we still talking about a proper lifelong learning strategy for adults over 20 years on from the Learning Age Green Paper? You might remember it. That was published for England back in 1998, I think it was. I mean, why are we still talking about it all these years on?
Yeah, I do remember it. I just started work and at what was NIACE, and the lifelong learning strategy had been published, and I saw that great foreword by David Blunkett and thought, oh, this is what it is. And actually since then there's been some real challenges, haven't there? A kind of real narrowing, I think, of what the offer is, and certainly a massive reduction both in the funding for adult learning and in participation. You know, after what we're calling a decade of decline in adult learning, a 47% cut in funding for adults outside apprenticeships since 2009 and 10. And you'll know we do a participation survey every year of adults engaged in learning and why and what the barriers are and things like that. And actually this is the 23rd year and this is the record low figure we've had. So we absolutely need to pick this up again and really focus on it. And there's no more critical time than now to do that.
Indeed. Pretty dire. And actually talking of that Learning Age Green Paper, I mean, the reason why I referenced it is because indeed that coincides with my early career as well. I was in my mid-20s and in fact I had a little hand in drafting parts of that particular green paper. So I remember the Blunkett forward very well indeed, and he did write it absolutely all himself. Now, Simon, your members have felt the impact of nearly 4 million less opportunities for adults. I think that figure actually comes from Fiona's Institute research. Yep. And, so what's out campaigning for them in terms of adult skills from, for example, the FE white paper in the autumn?
So we've been quite bold, I suppose, Tom, that we think there needs to be a reversal in the significant decline on investment in adult funding.
About 47% Fiona was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you look at over the last 10 years, the budget has virtually sort of halved, and the number of participants has obviously declined, and probably more training per individual. But we're calling for a tripling of the adult education budget when you start to factor in the impact of COVID, new digital entitlements. And one area that's not been mentioned today is obviously Brexit as well, and the big challenge about reskilling and supporting adults as part of challenges around sort of automation and filling those jobs as well. Yeah.
So Fiona, then, I mean, in terms of this sort of tsunami of unemployment, and of course, one's got to remember when we talk about these things, real people's lives are at stake here. But what kind of things then has the Learning and Work Institute said about how we meet the potential adult unemployment and skills challenges over the coming months?
Well, we're working on a paper at the minute, which we hope to publish probably next week.
Can you give us a sneaky preview?
Yeah, of course I can give you a sneaky preview. I mean, one of the things we're really concerned about, although as we've talked about, even before this crisis, there was a massive issue about both participation in learning and unequal access. But we're really concerned that actually unemployment is almost certainly above 3 million at the minute. Yeah. And we're really concerned that as the job retention scheme unwinds, then it could get higher and higher. So if just 1 in 5 of those people on the scheme lose their jobs, that's another 700,000 people. And so we need to act now, because if we wait until they fall out of the labour market, it's going to be much, much harder. So we're going to be calling for a universal support offer, because actually all of our jobs are changing. But to have a universal support offer that's very focused on, promoted to those on furlough, because whether they go back to work and therefore can really benefit in their workplace, or whether they're made redundant and have to look for a new job, then we really do think that they need opportunities and support to invest in their skills. But of course, for those people who are made redundant, those people who are put at risk, then actually we think we need some more intensive support, either to help people switch jobs, say to go to another employer, or to have a complete career change. And of course, with the current crisis, this having quite a sectoral impact. There'll be people that can't walk to the employer down the road doing a very similar thing. They really have to reconfigure what they're going to do. And so there's a range of things we're asking for. So absolutely the right information, advice and guidance for adults. And we need more investment there. But we need to extend entitlements to lifelong learning. So thinking about at level 3 as well. We need flexible learning. And I know you've talked about that earlier on in the show. But we have talked about, and again, you've referenced it, personal learning accounts for those who are at risk in that focus scheme. But also a kind of what we think is quite a neat idea, in that one of the challenges with a recession normally is you don't know whose jobs are going to go. But actually, we do know that with furloughed workers this time, they are most at risk. And so we've got a direct route to them. So we think that all businesses using the retention scheme should be asked to provide their furloughed workers with information about the universal support offer. And that when they put them at risk of redundancy, they should notify HMRC, and then the more detailed targeted offer could come into play there, so that we absolutely reach the people that we need to support.
And that was really the point that I was trying to make in the segment before, with Anne Milton and with David Cork, that in a very extraordinary way, it's two things actually that strike me about the government's coronavirus job retention scheme. One is just how extraordinary quick it was all put into place. I haven't heard hardly a complaint from anybody that they haven't been paid, whether that's a business or a furloughed worker. So something quite magical happened then in terms of getting that programme turned around and then getting the money into the pockets of the individuals that needed it. That's point number one. Point number two, I think you've touched on there with the learning accounts philosophy, is again, the state has shown that it can, where it needs to, if you like, reverse engineer. But you used to obviously pay money over to HMRC. Some of it comes back in the welfare system and things like tax credits. But Simon, ALP has been quite vocal on this in the past about using skills accounts as the sort of real game changer that could empower learners. It can get money away from the big quangos like Education Skills Funding Agency and actually get it into the hands of adults, so then they can spend it on the courses and products that your members provide.
Absolutely, Tom. So, the key really for us around skills accounts, whether they're skills accounts, skills wallets, there was a reference. A reference in all the main manifesto commitments. But for us, it's really about accessibility and choice for the individual. And, we had sort of 3 recommendations around skills accounts based on kind of previous failings, which actually could be implemented quite quickly. And very sort of briefly on those, one of the big challenges previously was there was too many providers involved in individual learning accounts. There was 8,910, which is way too many. We've now got a robust approved government register of training providers. We need a very specific catalogue of approved programs that go through there. And I think one of the things you touched on as well is around, the amazing enhancements around technology to enhance, control, protect the integrity of the system, so the government could identify trends quickly and suspend or investigate accounts based on specific behaviour. So, absolutely, for us, skills accounts is a no-brainer. It sort of focuses on improving accessibility and ultimately giving the individual choice about where they want to access their entitlement.
Great. Fiona, just 20 seconds, last word to you. If you were writing the Learning Age Green Paper again, what would be the number one top sentence in it about how we meet the adult skills challenge?
We absolutely need to invest more, but let's not forget there's real patterns of inequality as well. So we need to do much more work to show people the value of investing their skills. What will it do to them? How will it help them get a new job, earn more money? And then what sort of difference can it make? We need to kind of make that case to convince people that this is something they should do and will be great for them.
Okay, it's always great to get real experts on this programme that know their stuff when it comes to post-16 education, skills and employment. Fiona Aldridge, Director of Policy and Research at Learning and Work Institute. Simon Ashworth, Chief Policy Officer, ALP. Thanks both for coming on the show this evening.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tom.
You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Buick.
So, after such a scorch of a week so far, what better or funkier track to play out on than this one? It's called Sun-Kissed by Daniel Friedel. Don't forget, folks, we're an inclusive bunch in the FE News production team, so send us your thoughts. Email us, skillsworld@fenews.co.uk. above all, do make sure you tell your friends about the show and ask them to subscribe at one of their favourite podcasting sites. Thanks as always to Gavin O'Mara, our editor, and not forgetting Ellie Hansen, the show's and Fab's digital producer. Skills World Live is supported by the Federation of Awarding Bodies Platinum Partners Programme. See you next week. Goodbye.
Subscribe to Skills World Live at fenews.co.uk/Skills World.